I'd like to welcome you. I'm very honored to have you on board. It is one of the most challenging issues that we all face. Yes, so parenting is always a very important topic, and I will take you through the slides and I will show you how challenging it is. But it's also something that we all can take great pride in and interest because raising someone to be an outstanding person and a valuable person in society is always a meaningful task, a very meaningful mission. And I am a father of two boys. I am also a grandfather of two other boys. And I have been through my fair share of challenges. And today they are adults. They are in their 40s. One is 14, the other one is 45. And we sometimes do talk about some of the things that I've been through in my life with them. There is no hard and fast rules on these things. All we're going to do today is share some general principles. I'm going to come also from a perspective of my experience with my clients and I try and put as much a Singapore spin on it as I possibly can. And there are so much to learn. And it's for me as a senior counselor working with all these parents, it has been an honor and a privilege because it's not easy to work with a stranger. You know, a therapist is an absolute stranger, but they open up and they're very willing to share and they're very concerned for the kids. And I have been very blessed to be able to work with them and draw some lessons from all these cases. I think it's important to understand that the parenting relationship does not just exist on its own. Um, the parenting relationship is also a function of, with our children, is also a function of how we get on with our spouses and how the family as a whole works as a system. So there's a lot to go on, and just that little introduction, and I will wait a little bit longer for the participants to come in, and I will start sharing my screen. Thank you very much. So today is all about KPIs of being a good parent. It's one of those most stressful words in the dictionary, isn't it? KPI, key performance indicators. Sometimes I would like to see this as a key personal indicator, how well I'm doing for myself. So it's an interesting topic because we all see parenting in very general terms, and sometimes we don't kind of break it down a little bit. So what I'm going to try and help you do today is to try and look at the key core values of good parenting. And I have 8 of them, and I will share you with them. And as I go through each one of those, I will highlight what I think good parenting is all about under those values. And then we can ask questions about it later. All right, so this is interesting here. I thought I would show you guys this slide because over the last 2 years in Singapore, and especially with Straits Times and in some of our media, there has been this greater coverage on parenting and children. And we can see from some of this, if I may highlight some of this, things like down here, it says adverse childhood experiences raise the risk of mental illness later. When they start as ACEs when they are children, it can end up hurting them later on. Emotional neglect during childhood and how that affects one's mental health, right? Learning to make informed choices at a young age, right? To help children get into this this notion of becoming more independent and more resilient. Then you of course have these issues that deals with couples who split up, who divorce, and therefore what the impact on the children are going to be. Dads and how the important roles dads play in children's life, and there's something worth looking at. And then also using the village, right? The family befrienders, how the village can actually come into play to help us out. So these are some very interesting topics. This is just a minimum share because there are many more other articles in Straits Times about children and parenting that would be very useful for everybody. So let's look at the KPIs. This is what, in my opinion, are the KPIs that parents should maybe look at and maybe hold themselves to when they want to think about effective parenting, right? First one is passion. That is simply put, how ready we are and how passionate we are about wanting to be a parent. Sacrifice. Do we understand all the sacrifices that we have to put up with when we become parents? And some of us, most of us probably know the sacrifices we have to put up with. Teamwork, very important, especially with the wife. Caring for the family, what does it really mean when we want to care for the family? What are the issues involved? And of course, there is now this modeling, right? How can we project ourselves as being honest and full of integrity when we deal with our children, when we parent? And also, how do we respect them? How do we trust them? And even trust our spouses, their fathers and their mothers. Professionalism. So it is not just, get the child born and then just go ahead and roll out and do something about that, but it's also about how do you keep yourself updated about what are the issues that the parents have to address? How do we prepare ourselves as children go through various stages of development? And lastly, safety. I think this is important because there are issues on emotional and psychological safety that we must be aware of. And how we deal with our children, that would ensure that they remain safe and secure for the rest of their lives. So these are the 8 core values or KPIs, you want to call it. And after I finish with that, I will have a slide for you guys. And well, let's see how it goes. So the first one is passion, right? We need to have passion to be a parent, and we need to be ready for the task. So I think what is important here is knowing our roles and responsibilities as a parent. None of us go to parenting schools. And all the parenting that we know of comes mainly from our parents, maybe even our grandparents, watching how other people parent, maybe reading a couple of articles here and there and books here and there. So I thought it would be useful to just share what is good parenting about, right? And a good parenting is all about the ability to create a healthy social, emotional, mental development, and to help the child feel motivated all the time. That's what good parenting is all about, creating the sense of independence. So what is a good parent then? Well, it's someone who, very important, the first point, we do not want to parent our children, generally speaking, the way we were parented. And that's because the environment has changed, the situation has changed, the risks out there, the holes that children can fall in has changed. And the children themselves are different, They will always be a little bit, how many times have we all say, hey, nowadays the children are so smart and so sharp, right? So the environment's always changed. So if we parent our kids the way we were parented, we may be behind the power curve. A good parent is one who listens, lends a shoulder to cry on. I think that's very important, especially the listening part. One who shares opinions. A child will always have questions and opinions, and especially when they become teenagers. And we want to be able to entertain that and not be too judgmental, right? And when we want to criticize, we don't want to put them down. And this happens quite a lot in my experience. We want to be able to see their point of view and provide a constructive feedback. And that will help in the learning process, right? Boundaries, always important. We all need boundaries because even when they become adults, they're going to be subjected to boundaries. So must well get them used to it early, but at the same time, you don't want to be so hard because some boundaries can change, right? And we need to be flexible with the kids who wants to exercise their power and their own personal control. So some kind of flexibility will be very useful. Last but not least, I think is very important. The child at the end of when they become adults and they become senior adults, they want to look back and they want to say, my parents were a very important part of my life. And without them, I wouldn't be the kind of person I am, right? So that's important. Then I think it's also important to understand other parts like categories of parental behavior. So what is an abusive parent? Do we know? Before we get into one, if you have more than one child, you will favor one child above the other or over the other child. that will be quite abusive. The child who's left behind will feel hurt. There are homes where there is a lot of teasing and humiliation. You know, one of the things that I always worry about is, you know, the bullying and harassing that nowadays we're covering in the newspapers. A lot of that starts from home, and how the kids find how their parents are working with each other, how the elder sibling deals with the younger sibling. So this is something as a parent we don't want to do with a child. We don't want to threaten physical punishment. We don't want to either exercise it either. I know there are schools of thought about, you know, caning and stuff like that. That debate still goes on. The jury's still out. But wherever we can, I think sitting down, discussing, negotiating outcomes and consequences, I think that's a better way to go. We don't want to be emotionally absent with our children, right? And this is where the work-life harmony, which I will talk about later, comes into play. And we should not expect perfection out of our children. There are sometimes we do that because we worry for the future for themselves. But on the other hand, we have to be very careful we don't do that. We want the children to become who they want to become, not who we want them to become. That will put power in their corridors. How about parenting styles that actually undermine a child's mental health, right? Mental strength even. When you don't praise a child or don't affirm a child, when they put in a lot of effort, no matter what the outcome is, you will do them harm. If you invalidate or even squash a child's emotional disturbance, a child is crying and you tell them, don't cry, stop crying, you know, and you tell the boys, boys don't cry, things like that actually affect them. Gaslighting, where parents actually portray themselves as being perfect, as never making mistakes, and we all do make mistakes from time to time, and then we try and tell the children that they are making the mistakes and we don't, you know. So we should be able to show them that we are humans, we do make mistakes, we can apologize, right? Parenting firing a child early. This can happen from time to time. That means parents are too busy, more than one child, the eldest child is made to parent. When you parent a child, the other children, for example, take care of the other children, for example. When you do that, then you're removing the childhood from them. And the childhood part of them growing as a child is very important. And when parents do not model healthy responses to stress, anxiety, the children will pick that up. The children will think that, oh, if I am not happy with something, I just blow my top, you know, I just look disorganized. I look unable to solve the problem. So if you're not interpreting and not responding constructively to things that happen to us, then we are going to teach the children that habit too. Other bits and pieces about passion and to be ready for parenting, love the father and the mother of your children. So important for the children. They want to see that their father and mother are there loving their family and always working towards a healthy and happier family. We always want to love more and judge less, right? The bullying, the harassing, the punishment, looking down on the kid. And very important, one of these days, try and log the amount of time you actually spend interacting with your family members, your wife or your husband and your children. And see at the end of the week whether you're spending enough time with your family members to make a difference, to grow them healthily. And don't forget, at the end of the day, when you want to be ready for parenting, it is a long journey. So don't look at things like, I need to be only here until they are 11 years old, 12 years old, and after that, I'm leaving them be. It's not really true. You have this journey goes all the way until they become parents themselves. Your children become parents themselves because you have a wealth of experience that you can bring to your children as you go along. So don't focus on the short term. Look at this as a very long-term journey so that even when they are slow and they are slow developers or they have a lot of problems along the way, you're looking more long-term in trying to help them become more successful in the longer term. So that's passion for you. So let's look at sacrifices and the kind of roles that we have to set, right? So it's very easy to become a father and mother, isn't it? But it's very, very challenging to be a mom and dad. Because to be a real mom and dad, it requires some very strategic lifestyle changes. One of them is, do we understand the importance of a dad in a child's life? You know, up there in the slide, it says, you know, to the dad, the son sees the dad as his first hero. For the daughter, is the first love. And they look to dads, children looks to dad to lay the rules and enforce them. They look to dads as providing the security, both the physical and the emotional. The daughters look at dads as, hey, this is the way a good relationship with a man is going to be like, right? And they're going to learn from this, right? And when they eventually get on and have their own partners, it's going to make a difference. For sons, they look at the dad's character and they try and understand from the dad's character what's it like, and they will tend to be like that. There is a tendency for sons to model after the dad. But the most important here is that dads needs to show to the children what taking one's ownership of one's life is all about. How do you account yourself for the mistakes that you make, for the non-accomplishments? How do you bounce back? And are you very clear about your responsibilities to you, yourself, to your family, to your life as a whole? This OAR, ownership, accountability, responsibility, is something that dads bring into the children's life. Not that the moms don't, but dads can tend to do it more. But then how about the mom? What does the mom bring to the child? The moms are all about love, right? All about passion, all the soft, caring parts, right? Helping the child understand their emotional needs and the ability to understand other people's emotional needs. Helping a child to learn to be sensitive towards others and other people's needs and other people's thoughts, right? Helping a child to learn trust and how to be trustworthy. Moms have a lot of hard work to do in the household, and that work cannot be done if they don't learn how to trust. And they don't learn how to be kind and loving to nurture people into better habits. And moms have a lot to do. There's no doubt about that. Many moms over generations I've seen. And to be able to do all that they have to do, they need a constructive attitude, they need hard work, discipline, regime. And I think the children are watching this, and they're going to learn from the mom too. And there is also this work-life harmony thing. It used to be called work-life balance, but now it's beginning to become work-life harmony. That is something that Singapore has created and is focusing on even right up to today. In other words, for both parents to put the family first when needed. So harmony is like sometimes your work will have to come more important, but sometimes the family must be more important. So this is the harmony part that we have to play, right? And when children see that, and when it happens in the family, for the children, it's good for them because they learn how to develop and thrive, because that will provide a warm, loving, attention-filled family environment, right? Good for parents because they get a chance to top up their love tank with their spouses. They get the chance to interact with their children, understand how they're growing and what's bothering them. And they have this balance about work. I'm good. I'm very happy with my work. I'm also happy at home. And it prevents burnout. When one is happy and very balanced and centered, it really does become very healthy mentally. And of course, when you know when to focus on the family, when to focus on the members of the family, and when to focus on your job, I think eventually at home, it lends to a better relationship all around. Next one is about teamwork. Very important, right? So I start off with the most important question, and sometimes there are some split views on this one. Who are the most important people in the house? Parents or children? When I ask this question, which relationship is the most important relationship in the home? I get mixed answers. And this is all because of how we were raised and how we saw parenting and how we saw families when we were young and even before that. So some people say the most important relationship is the one between mom and dad. Because if that relationship doesn't work, then everything downstream is going to be stressed. It's going to be stretched. Some will say, no, the children are most important. Then if the children are most important, are we getting to the point where we actually spoil them or give them everything that they need? And then with that, the children will get into this gratification and entitlement mentality. So this is an important question. You go to a company, the top man decides all the policy, make it work, right? The CEO. You go to an army, military, it's the general who decides how things are going to be run, right? At home, surely it must be the parents, right? I mean, that's my point of view. Parenting and parenting relationship is the most important. And you get that right, everything else will fall in place. So work with the spouse and children to create a happy family environment. That is very important. Everybody in the house, from the dad to the mom to the children, want a home environment that they love to come back to, just to relax, to relate, to talk about their hard times during the day, for someone to listen to them, right? We need to have an accommodative and very caring family environment. And to do that, we need to develop skills for negotiating differences within the home. And there will always be differences. We'll come to that later. We need to have lots of activities to promote laughter and fun. We need dopamine and serotonin effects in the home environment. And we need to do things that actually expand energy. You know, go out and do outdoor activities as a family. Just driving around is not effective in relating. Just attending a movie and sitting down there for 2 hours is not relating. Sitting around the dining table and everyone attending to their handphone is not relating. Watching TV at home and just laughing is not relating. Relating means expending energy, doing things that you can see the other person, the way the other person reacts to certain situations. You begin to understand that. And then there's also this thing called family meetings, weekly family meetings, which I will recommend, because I think it is important for everybody to get together and to know what is going well for each person and what is not going well. And this ability to reflect, the ability to lean on somebody to find some solutions to our day-to-day problems and stresses is going to be useful. So useful for mom and dad also to sit down and listen to the kids to see what's going well for them, what is not. Because sometimes you can be so busy, work-life harmony is out of whack, and you really get to see your kids only on weekends, right? So time to sit down and listen. Now, the next point here is very important, right? Dad and mom to align parenting strategies and not alienate each other. I see this and I get very concerned when I see this. And I'm seeing this a bit. In other words, the dad has grown up thinking that he's learned something from his parents about parenting. The mom grows up and she has learned something about parenting. And then they bring those parenting strategies into the home and they are 180 apart, right? And when that happens, then they start to defend their parenting strategies, and then it leads to alienation. And then the children will see that, right? And so when we don't align our parenting strategies the way we parent, one wants to be, let's say, authoritative, which I'll come to a bit later. The other one wants to be authoritarian. And the children get very confused. So which is what? What do you want out of me? You know, kind of stuff. And that will create confusion for them. And that does not help in the spousal relationship either. So very important to align our parenting strategies, sit down and discuss how do we want to parent our kids? When is the dad going to have the leadership and when is the mom going to have the leadership, right? Which is the other bullet down here. How do we support the parent when they are doing their parenting on the children, and don't interfere and don't interrupt and don't misalign, you know, and don't give conflicting signals. So this part of parenting is very important. Although we are talking about how parents should parent children, this is a very essential part of parenting children. The children want to see their father and mother holding hands and working things out together. The other part is working with a village. We all have heard the African saying, right? It takes a village to raise a child. And that's so important. There are going to be times when we will not know what solutions we can bring to a child's problem. And there's no harm going out there and talking to other people about it and comparing notes if necessary. We have extended families like the grandfathers, uncles, aunties. We have neighbors sometimes who very close neighbors we can go and lean on. We have the school. And we have extracurricular agencies, things that we send our children for enrichment classes. And there may be one or two very senior people who are watching the kid, you know. And there are also select children's friends, right? We can also talk to the children's friends if my children is having a problem. What, what do their friends, what are they seeing? And maybe even the children's friends' parents. So we have this large group of people that we can lean on and go to. If you feel that our child has a problem and we don't have a solution, we can go and seek this solution. Of course, on top of all this, you have the professional therapists you can go to. So ultimately, we want to help them, the village, and link up to them to help you so that you can help your children. And don't forget, they are there for a reason. And the old days, we will leave children with the neighbors and will go out. And when the children are naughty, the neighbors will come in. You know, the latest television ad on the vaccination jabs for the old people, it's a clear example of how the old days were. And I think it is still there if we want to lean on it. The other part about teamwork is learning together how to promote discipline. Now, here I'm not talking about rotan and caning and belting. This is when you promote discipline, you're talking about establishing boundaries because the children need to know, as I mentioned earlier, they need to know there are rules because there are going to be rules when they become adults. And they need to know that when you break the rules and when you break boundaries, there are going to be consequences. So you start early by developing this understanding in these areas, right? You don't, as a 15-year-old, come and sleep with mom and dad. Mom and dad's bedroom is a boundary area you don't cross, for example. And for children who are 16, 17, you don't go barge into their rooms either. That's a boundary, right? So why do we need these boundaries? Because I ask this question to many parents, when they come to ask for parenting chats. I say, is your child presenting any problems at school? Are there much problems with the discipline master, the class teacher, or the counselor? And they say no. So generally, they are more behaved in school than they are at home. Yes. So that is a question. Why is it that we have come to a situation where children are less behaved at home than they are at school? So we have to insist on good behavior. In other words, we need to have a system in the home, which the school has, right? That means a system where if one person goes ballistic, the others are not going to be affected. And this also applies to the parents. In the household, there must be a system where we are all behaving and interacting in a manner where everybody benefits from the system. When one person doesn't want to do that, like they don't want to clean up their room, for example, and put extra pressure on the mom to clean up the room. They don't clean up the plates, for example, and puts extra pressure on the dad to want to clean up the plates. Then the system is breaking down. So the children need to understand that mom and dad should show this by good behavior, that there must be a system of behavior within the home where everybody will benefit from. And that's what the school has. So we need to also understand that and be able to develop that, right? And when we do all this, and when we promote discipline, then we will also help the children not develop entitlement mentality and gratification needs, which is something that comes from permissive parenting and something that comes from neglectful parenting. So we have to be very careful about these two things. Because when they develop this at home, and when they get out there to the workplace, they're going to be expecting the same too. They want the fastest promotion to the highest position possible in the shortest time possible and with as much money as possible. And we're hearing this, right, in the workplace. Then when it comes to poor behavior, there are going to be consequences, and we need to co-decide. The parents and the children need to work this together. If the child is not behaving, like for example, during the teenage period where they are taking risks, for example, then that risk will carry safety issues, that will carry regulation issues, that may be working against the law. And therefore, the children need to understand this nice and early, right? About how poor behavior and habits can lead to bad consequences. And these are the things that if you don't have enough time in the week with the children, how are you going to discuss these things? And I will show you a slide later about the kind of taboo subjects that I think many parents are not getting into, and I can see that, right? So consequences, the children need to understand, especially as they get older and older, and parents can co-decide on the consequences, but eventually whether the child takes it or not, is essentially, as they get older, more a child's decision. And I'll tell you that why. So as far as teamwork is concerned, there are also going to be situations where we have to resolve family conflicts, right? And what are the key ways of doing that? Avoid destructive arguments, don't escalate. If you're not getting anywhere in a discussion and it's getting into an argumentative flavor, then call it off, knock it off. You don't have to solve it at that moment in time, generally speaking. You can actually go into a holding pattern, let all the emotions settle down, and then reapproach it again. What is very important here is parents need to keep track of the interactive habits with their children and understand what works and what does not work. And sometimes I see parents always repeating what does not work, as versus initiating something that may work together with the child and then continuing along those patterns. So learn how to compromise, especially when there are challenges between child and parent and differences of opinion. And to be able to compromise, especially, let's say, for even between husband and wife, between parents, right? You need to understand what the other person's picture album is. That means what is their worldview? How do they see things, right? How do they perceive things? What are the beliefs? And how are they behaving to get what they want? And we all tend to behave in a way to get what we want, right? The people who, let's say adults who engage in substance abuse, it's only because their life is miserable, they don't know how to deal with it, and so they need their dopamine and serotonin effects, and they go and abuse substance. Children will, if they have an unhappy home, especially teenagers, and they want to feel their serotonin and dopamine effects, they will leave the house at odd times, they come back very late, they mix around with their friends. So we need to understand that people have needs, and I will show you some of those needs a bit later. Negotiate differences. Whenever you want to go one way and your child wants to go another way, this is what you have to do, right? You need to allow the other person at the end of the discussion to feel affirmed, okay? Sense of power and self-worth. You need the other person to feel that their needs have been satisfied. And there are 5 of those which I will show you later. You need to help the other person feel that they're listened to and respected. In other words, acknowledged. Okay? You don't put them down. You don't gaslight them, right? And when you bend a little bit and you give up a little bit from your position, then the other person will feel accepted, right? So this is very important in negotiations. How do we conduct it in such a manner that we can meet these 4 outcomes? And anybody who feels these 4 outcomes are satisfied, then anytime there's a future difference, they are willing to engage you. Otherwise, they won't. They will only want to raise issues to you. And I have seen that happen too, especially teenagers, right? So now we come into caring. So important for also effective parenting, right? How do you exercise care? And there are 3 things that we need to do, or 4 things. We need to be able to exercise empathy, to be able to see what the child is going through, to put ourselves in the child's shoes, to see what the child is going through. The child needs to feel that you are genuinely interested in wanting to help them. Not that you're just doing as a passing thing, You're too bothered with your work. Yeah, let's do this, or you do this, or get out of the way kind of stuff. So you need to be genuine, you need to be there for them. They need to feel that they are accepted, the way they are, the way they think, the way they act. Yeah, sometimes it gets under your skin, but that is still unconditional acceptance because they are your child. And then there will be some mindful interventions that is going to be very necessary. And I'll cover that a little bit later too, which is very important in exercising care. One very important thing in caring is first, before even you care for somebody, is to understand what are their concerns and what are their fears, right? And look at the list here. All the school children have all these things. These are the biggest concern, right? Of course, schools means good grades. I mean, all parents are chasing good grades, right? Most parents are chasing good grades, right? And then there are others who have body image issues. Some of them will say, my body is too short, my leg is too long. I am too dark. Nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody wants to come to me. How can I have friends and nobody wants to come to me? And they feel very stressed out, you know. And of course, that means that they are not fitting in. And this is one of the biggest issues for children, right? The ability to fit in as much as we adults also want to fit in. Now, some of us are naturally introverted and we like to rather remain on our own. But most of us are social creatures and we want to fit in. So we don't want to be left out. We hate to be betrayed. If you're not good in some of the activities in school, people will say you're lousy. Then you get bullied and harassed. And this is something that they worry about. And then, of course, when you get into a first world country like ours, entitlement mentality, you know, gratification, fear of missing out comes into play, right? Oh, they have an iPhone 11. How come I don't have? He has got $5 for tuck shop money. How come I'm only getting $1? Right? So all these things start coming into play. Not having a loving and a happy home to come back to. How many kids are facing this? And it's so important for them, for safety, for security, right? And this is one of the other things. How many children have a lot of authoritative figures to answer to? I mean, I have seen cases where mom and dad is very busy, child goes to the grandparents' home, mom and dad comes back, picks them up from there. Sometimes the child has to go to a school care center. And so they go from, I have mom to answer to, I have dad to answer to, I may have grandfather and grandmother to answer to, maybe two sets, mom and dad side. Then I have this grandma mentor who comes in at 2 o'clock to babysit me because I can't go home because I'm a latchkey kid, right? Then I have the domestic helper. You know how difficult it is for a child to go from one authoritative center to another, to try and find some consistency in their life, to be attended to emotionally, to be attended to even behaviorally. Not easy. So we need to understand this. So in caring, we need to understand there's going to be a lot of changes as children develop, right? And I'll show you a graph. They go from a pre-teen to the teen and to the post-teen period, the adolescence period between 12 and 24, 25. And as they go through all these changes, by God, the parents will need to adjust and adapt. And a lot of you out there know that, right? But guess what? Other things are also changing within the family. The wife is changing because she is also going through different stages of development. The father is also changing because he's going through different stages of development. And every time a new child enters the family, the whole family dynamics changes. So dynamics is a given. All we parents have to learn is to learn how to adjust, adapt, and accommodate to it. Work together as a team to do that, right? The other thing for caring is to help the children develop a growth mindset. They need to learn, they need to love learning, and they need to love attending to challenging situations so that they develop their resilience. Put them in one, but monitor them and shepherd them so that they know that they can always turn to you for answers, right? And then these are the 4 parenting styles that I was talking about earlier, right? Most of you, I'm sure, realize that. The best one is to be authoritative. That means there is boundaries, there's rules, there's regulations, but there's also coaching, mentoring, flexibility. But when you go into some of this stuff, authoritarian, you don't have any of those, my way or the highway. And down here comes when you're not enough around for your children. So you tend to buy their love or buy their silence by being permissive and sometimes even neglectful. And you see that. You see that in shopping centers, see that in restaurants. Nowadays, when a child is acting up in a restaurant, you give him an iPad or iPhone to keep the child quiet. In the old days, parent will come and pick up the child, walk outside, and then talk to the child, what's happening, what's going wrong with you, right? And so in this parenting style is so important both parents can adopt, generally speaking, the same parenting style. Can you imagine one being very authoritative or even permissive and the other one being authoritarian? Boy, I tell you, the children will be very confused. One says no handphones, no internet, no social media, And as soon as that person who says that has the back turned on the children, the other parent will say, okay, go ahead. You can do it for the next 2 hours. Do it before the other person comes in. It's going to be destroying. Last one here is about learning how to be more differentiated and enmeshed. Now, what is this? This is very interesting also, right? So this is the next slide. Now, enmeshed family. This is enmeshed, okay? That means as soon as one person flips, the other person will flip because they are tied by an umbilical cord. There's so much codependency. Your happiness is my happiness. My happiness is dependent on your happiness. My level of stress is dependent on your level of stress. No boundaries, no privacy, okay? And because you're so enmeshed, when something goes wrong, you get right into someone else's face. There's escalation, there's fights. And in enmeshed situations, you always want to have the other person's time. The other person doesn't have their own time, right? And they can't even have their own company, their own people, because you just want to be there with them all the time, right? This is like the 2-year-old child who has separation anxiety as soon as the parents leave, right? But guess what? Some families are so enmeshed that it still continues into their old age. So what is the more healthier way of relating to a person? And that is on the right side, right? Differentiated. And all the opposites are here. And when you're differentiated, we're not saying that you don't love the person, that you don't care for them. What we're trying to say is if one person in that relationship is not having a good time, they're stressed out and they're emotionally disturbed, the other person is separated enough to be composed enough to be able to see what is happening because they're stepping out of the situation and they are in a better emotional and mental state to come in to help. And to develop that differentiation, we need to respect boundaries. We need to respect privacy as the child grows older and older. You need to be able to develop independently. We will all be our own different persons eventually anyway, right? And you need to have your own time to attend to your own issues and get together with others when there is a need to do so. So something for families to consider. I know the desire for the children to do well, you sit on top of them, helicopter parenting, which I'll come to later, all these things. When you do these things and you're in the child's face because you're so concerned for the future and their safety, you will get enmeshed. And that would generate a new set of problems. Next core value is honesty and integrity. Modeling good behaviors. What are these disciplined behaviors within the family? And I put a list out there, right? Work-life harmony. The children are learning how the parents will treat the family as priority whenever there is a need to. The children are also seeing the family members have healthy use of devices. So at a dining table, no devices. Whether it's at home or outside, the need for face-to-face communication and talking and sharing is important, right? Lifestyle changes. You don't want to have parents becoming couch potatoes, drinking and eating without constraint, becoming very sick and not taking care of their physical health and their mental health even. Now even mental health becoming more important. You want to model this to your children so that they can pick it up too. Healthy coping with stresses. When there is a stress situation, we'll always have stress situation throughout our lives. We want to show that we can interpret it constructively, right? And we can respond to it in a healthy fashion. Not panic, not catastrophize, not fortune tell, don't stress out, because the children are going to pick these habits. If you're going to have a stressed out individual parent, the children are going to become, they will say that is the best way. If something bad happens and does not meet my expectation, I immediately go ballistic. That's not going to be helping, right? No impulsive behaviors. In other words, even the parents have to show that I am willing to forego something because there is a bigger benefit for my family. The parents must show that they can manage their entitlement mentalities and their gratification needs. And they need to show the children this, that I don't need to buy this dress or that phone or this car or go to a very expensive restaurant or whatever it may be, just to get my dopamine and serotonin effect, that means I'm willing to drop some of them. And respecting and growing relationship with family and extended family. Oh, how much of this is happening? My God, I see that. When I see marital cases and how couples have problems with their in-laws. And when couples are having problems with the in-laws, the children are watching, you know. And then that becomes a tension between the couple themselves. How come you don't like my mother? How come you don't like my father? What is it? Why do you always complain to my mother about something that's happening to you, us? And why is it you can't tell me about it, right? So these kind of things come up. And so this ability to respect, work with extended families is so important for the kids. All about relationship management. And we need to model that. Helping out at home, right? No harm for the dad to pick up the broomstick from time to time. No harm for the mother to take up the kids for a physical activity. No harm for the dad to cook a meal for the home once in a while. It doesn't have to be by traditional rules, you know. Wife must look after the house, keep it clean, and cook for me. And the wife is saying the husband needs to be here to care for me, to care for the children, and so on and so forth. So a joint way of looking at helping each other at home is very helpful, shows togetherness, shows integrity on the part of the individual, right, parent. So what if we make a parenting mistake? And this is where the integrity comes up even to the fore. And we all will make mistakes. We will make mistakes with our spouses and the children will see it. And we will make mistakes with ourselves and the children will see it. And we'll make mistakes with our children and the other child will see it, right? So if it is not working out well and is causing tension, then we have to recognize it. And we have to determine why it happened. We have to apologize for it. And then we have to be big enough to discuss it, what contributed to it, how we can get out of this, and what we can learn from it. And then take actions to try and reduce the relapse in this kind of issues. And then move on again. I think if we do all this as parents, I think the children will learn from this and learn their relationships and the stresses in their life much better, right? The other part about mutual respect and trust is about respecting your spouse. And it's very important that when I see sometimes parents come to us for parenting counseling, the first question I will always ask them is this. And the parents are disagreeing about how they are dealing with the children. So this is the first question I will always ask them. Do you think your wife is going to harm your children by what she's doing? Do you think your husband is intending to harm your children by what he's doing? Invariably, I give an answer, no, they're not harming. Then why is it that they can't sit together and work together, right? Why is it that we have to continue with misaligned strategies and then continue to alienate the other parent? Because you know they're not going to harm you. Just we have difference in opinions and beliefs and perspectives on how best to deal with a child, but as long as they're not intending to harm, then we can work together. For the children, we have to learn how to respect their opinions and their views, show interest in them, understand their thinking. Very important because they want to feel acknowledged, verified, and understood. Right? And for parents coming from a position of wisdom is so important. And one way of doing that is engage in connecting behaviors. That means accept the child for who they are, listen when they have a problem, and listen carefully. Yeah? Support and encourage what they want to do for themselves, as long as it's not going to get them unsafe, although you may have a different view. And the negotiate differences, as I said earlier, you know, acknowledge, accept, affirm, and I think it will go well. So if you want to influence your children, that's the biggest bullet here, right? If you want to influence your children for the better, for their own lives, then you must be able to relate to them well. If you don't relate to them well, there's no way you're going to be influencing them. No chance. Next one is professionalism. We've got 10 more minutes, it should be able to be done. In professionalism, we need to understand the science behind how children grow. And this book here, shared by my good friend of mine, Brainstorm is a very good book. And in fact, there was a video done by Dan Siegel. And he actually deals with a lot of children type, family type issues. And he is trying to put to rest a lot of myth about what raising children is all about, what teenagers are all about, what adolescents are all about, right? And we can see this. This is the book, and it's very interesting about understanding why teenagers do things the way they do, take risk, split from the parents, friends become important. What is happening to the brain? How is the brain developing that makes them do this? And that is very, very useful. So get to understand how children grow and change, because that is changing by the decades, as society evolves, is changing. And then you have different types of cultures. You have the American culture, this is an American book. And then you also have the Singapore culture and how Singapore children are changing too. So we need to understand the differences. And then different parenting styles for different times, very, very important. The inverted funnel approach, which I'll explain a bit later with the next slide, the three key periods, the teen and the post-teen is where the adolescence periods are. And then doing mindfulness when you are dealing with your children, a very mindful, controlled approach is so important. Getting emotionally upset does not work, right? So this is the parenting journey that I put together. And I think there are 3 stages here, right? So they have a pre-teen. So basically, we want our children to go from dependent to becoming independent, right? And they will be dependent from the time they are born to about the age of 12. Yeah, this is the pre-teen period. They need you. They need you. And then you have the age 12 to age 19. That is when they want to start breaking out. And that is part of the development part. They have to get out and to be themselves eventually. And their physiology, the psychology drives them in that direction. But parents think that they are rebelling and they don't want us no more. Read that book, brainstorm, and you'll understand it more. And then once they get to beyond a certain stage, they're on their own, right? The inverted funnel approach is all about being very tight with your children for when they're young, because they don't understand safety and they're very vulnerable. And then releasing the control on them as they get older, right? So as they go from pre-teen to adolescence to post-teen, you have to let them go. And they have to start learning things on their own, right? So when they need you, yeah, this is a good time to set in some good knowledge and some good values, okay? Teach them about ownership, accountability, responsibility. Teach them how to negotiate. Teach them resilience. Teach them how important it is to connect with people. And then as they get older, they will start wanting to break out. Then you got to dealing from this, oh, my child loves me, to now my child don't love me. For parents, is a huge adjustment to make, right? Now they want confidentiality, they want privacy, and all you can do is only facilitate, collaborate. You cannot drive them, you cannot control them anymore, and don't rescue them, right? You have to accept this person growing up, you have to start letting them go, right? And then you need to just relate to them in such a way that you're topping up the relationship for the longer term. Remember the future, the longer term. Then they become their own parents. You still want to be there with them, right? Good for you, good for them. And then when they're on their own, you become the goalkeeper, just a consultant, right? You only get muscle, you can only go in when you're invited. And don't be capo and don't poke your nose into all their affairs, right? And they also should know that there are no more free lunches. Once they get to that point and they're working, then they have to pay if they're going to stay with you, for example, right? Best of luck with that one. But they need to know that you are on your own, you have your own elder age issues to attend to, and you have your own life now to attend to, right? And so they have to learn to be themselves. They cannot be totally dependent on you no more, and they have to be able to contribute to the family's development, right? And when you get older and they get older, now you have this ability to share new insights, and that's very important too. So the inverted funnel approach, very useful. And then there is the other thing on mindfulness. And this is, I would suggest this is very important for parents and children. And whenever you can, I would suggest that you all engage in this program. I'm not selling you Koyo because I come from Brahm Centre, but I think mindfulness is very useful for everybody. Because as you are growing up with your child, you are also learning how to let go, right? With mindfulness and the ability to breathe, adaptive, manage your emotions and your thoughts, you can learn how to let go. You can learn how to let go of thoughts and feelings about your children that's not doing you any good. It's not doing your relationship any good. It will help you to accept your children as they are, not the children that you want to satisfy your needs, because that's also the bigger issue of accepting life as it is. And there's also loving kindness. I mean, they will do things that annoy you, but when you are aware of your children's feelings and your own feelings, and you can forgive and forget and just accept them for who they are and love them for who they are, I think you lay the ground for greater compassion and promotes a very open and accepting attitude towards the children. This is something that when you go through mindfulness training, you will get to hear about. There are other things called stop, there's called rain. But essentially what he's saying is every time you get into a situation where your temper is getting out of control, your hair is standing on your back, your temperature is flaring up, you just stop. Just stop. Then just observe what are the thoughts going through you. Just observe what are your emotions that's going through. Just observe. Don't make any judgments about it. Just observe. And then breathe. Why breathe? Because every time you are anxious, stressed, or upset, cortisol, this is one of the hormones, floods our brains and then floods our ability to think, this prefrontal cortex area, and we cannot think logically anymore. Then once we breathe and we settle down and we cool down, then we can ask ourselves again, okay, go back to the situation. So what is it that's happening? How am I going to deal with this? And what are the consequences of some of my choices that I have? And then once you know that, now you can pick up a response. So that's why I say when you get upset, there's no need to address it and solve it in the immediate moment. Take a time break, do a sober, and come back to it. So in managing teenagers, pick your battles. And my biggest recommendation here is don't sweat the small stuff. Okay, stop the nagging. This is the bigger journey. Look at the bigger journey and the bigger issues that you need to be there with your children. Okay, decide on rules and boundaries in advance. Don't pop it up on them suddenly in the midst of an argument either. So earlier the better. Help them reflect on their choices. Give them choices. Give them choices. Let them exercise their choices wherever possible. And you only come in when maybe there's a safety involved, right? Let them fail. Don't bail them out. Because they have to learn, right? They're going to go out there and learn on their own anyway. It's better that they fail under your roof when you're still there than when they are out there all by themselves and they do not know how to deal with it, right? At least you are there to be able to help them. Prepare them to live in their own world, not in yours, because their world is going to be very different from yours, right? Keep the communications line open, respect their opinions and feelings. And again, come back to ownership, accountability, and responsibility. You need to understand that they need to learn these things, and their need for privacy and confidentiality and non-interference are all leading into this direction, right? They have to be their own adults. So when there are communication and conversation skills, when you have problems like that, just clarify what the other person, what your child wants, ask their opinion. Accept what they are saying in a non-judgmental way, because they have a view and they have their own worldview, they have their own opinions, they see things differently. Focus on the issues, and don't make decisions for the other person. Whenever there's an issue, you kind of discuss it and eventually let them make the decision based on the discussion and the consequences. And when you talk, be very careful with how you talk, right? You can be very assertive and very firm, but you don't have to be angry. Right? You can be direct, but don't resort to disconnecting habits like blaming. You can be very empathetic and understanding, but you don't have to appear weak. Let the other person know, from your perspective, let the other person know what is wanted or what is intended. They need to know. If you made a mistake, admit the mistakes. And taking responsibility for the feeling and doing behavior. That means if you are feeling lousy and you have exploded and you have done something wrong that didn't go down well, then take responsibility, apologize, without blaming anybody. Because ultimately, we are responsible for our own behaviors. And these are some examples of statements from parents that will make you very professional, right? So if you have a problem with one of your child, you can turn around and say, I'm having a problem with what you're doing. You're going out, staying up late, you're drinking, you're smoking, you're vaporing, you know. And I think I have to change what I do. That means the way I'm relating to you, or we'll never solve the problem, because going head on is not solving the problem. So you take it on yourself to make the change. Then they will maybe appreciate that, right? The other one is, I want to learn. I want you to learn from your mistakes. How do you do that? My job, if either one of us are dissatisfied with what you're doing, is to get together and to help you figure out a better way. That means you're also taking ownership for this responsibility, for this relationship, right? And you also want to be accountable for what is happening in this relationship, and you want it to go well. So you work together in a very calm, collected way, right? This is something I put it out there for everyone. If you can do this in your day-to-day interactions with your children, I think you'll be doing well. Don't rush to kepo, rush to relate to the person, right? Don't rush to reply. When a child is talking and we're upset and we are forming solutions in our head without even listening. So listen, such an important behavior. Listen, listen, listen. Don't try and rush to be ahead and catastrophize, right? Rush to be in the moment, okay? Don't rush to judge, rush to understand. Don't rush to advise, rush to journey with the child. Right? Don't rush to help. They need to learn how to do things on their own. Rush to enlighten them. And don't rush to control. Very easy for all parents, external control. Rush to facilitate. So last few slides on safety. Very important to provide emotional safety for our spouse and children. They need to feel safe and attended to. And for many parents here, this is our normal tendency here. When something goes wrong, we start catastrophizing. Oh my God, this is going to happen into the future. And all the good things they have done gets neglected. We minimize it. And all the bad things they have done, we suddenly maximize it. Doesn't help. And these are the basic needs I mentioned earlier, right? We all have these needs. Okay, we take a slide of this one. Because if you as a parent are not meeting your basic needs, and your child is not meeting your basic needs, his basic needs or her basic needs, then you're in a position for conflict. We need to understand which of their needs they're not meeting and why, and then help them to meet it. And you also have to attend to yours. Because anytime a need is not met, then that's going to be, you're going to start behaving in a way to get it met, right? And that behavior can be a bad behavior. So a typical standard one is the parents are too busy working because they want to meet their survival needs, right? But the teenage son or daughter needs freedom and wants fun. And they're going at this because for this one is already assured, right? So they're going very hard on this one. And you're both on two different trajectories. And then that's going to affect the last one, love and belonging. Okay? So we need to understand our children also have needs. Don't prepare them for failure. So these are all the negative parenting styles, right? Helicopter parenting, we have heard all this before. Snow plowing, removing obstacles for them rather than letting them remove it for themselves, right? Making decisions for them, which school to go to, what job to pick up, which studies to go for, which university overseas to go for. Let them decide, right? And not letting them fail and bailing them out. That's the biggest thing we can do to undermine their ability to be resilient. Remember, I talked about issues that we need to talk about. Many of these issues, parents don't talk with their children until it's too late. LGBTQ issues. There are children out there who don't feel good about their gender orientation or their sexual orientation. And you need to know that. You need to be open enough for them to come to you about that. Then there are all these other addiction matters that's coming up, right? Gaming, the biggest challenge with parents, don't know how to handle it. Social media addiction, right? Alcohol and drugs amongst the youngs growing up a lot. Smoking, vaporing, latest newspapers are showing vaporing is picking up, right? Promiscuous sex, porn, 9-year-olds getting into porn at very young, early age, boys getting into porn at very early age. Gambling, right? And then all this entitlement, gratification syndrome, boy-girl relationships. A lot of issues there, parents. And you have to attend to them. You cannot just say, no, 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 it won't happen to my kid. My kid is good. It won't happen. No. My personal experience has shown that, no, that's wrong. It can happen. And it can happen and surprise you. So if a child is going to fail, the child is going to fail. We cannot stop it from happening. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And whatever the child does that constitutes failure, you talk it out with the child. And then you take the lead and you try and manage it together with the child. You comfort them, you stay calm, and then you try and find a way to move forward, right? And sometimes you have to change the attitudes. Sometimes you have to change the behavior, because sometimes changing behavior can change attitude, but in the bulk of it all, change attitude happens. And that change attitude happens from very early on, even during the pre-teen periods. So staying with them is so important. Spending time with them, very important. So last few slides, this is basically summarizes that you can only control your own behavior, right? And if you have to change somebody, the only person you can change is yourself. You cannot change the other person. You're not in their mind, you're not in their brain, you're not in their body, you're not in their beliefs, you're not in their perspectives. So you are the only person who can make the change. Right? This is useful, okay? This is what is going to happen to you all the time with your children. Right? You don't always control what happens to you, but you can control how you interpret what is happening to you as a parent and how you respond. That you can control and be very clear about this. And this is a little Buddhist saying from Larry Young, and it just basically talks about how we have to interact without causing harm. So he starts about how to be open and aware, how therefore he wants to be kind. It can't be fine, how to be non-judgmental. And if that doesn't happen, not to cause harm. And eventually, given all the human feelings that we have, if we really are still going to be bad, then we cause the least harm. And that is what we need to be aware of when we deal with our children. Cause the least harm if we have no other way out. And if this is the only way you're going to respond. From the children, this is an anonymous quote, right? And maybe some of you have seen this. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. Involvement is what it's all about. Being with them, discussing with them what they want, what are the choices, what are the consequences. Let them fail, let them learn while you are still around, right? And then eventually they will turn the corner. So they want to be involved, because that is, as they become teenagers, that is when they want to break away, and that's where they want to become their own people, and you have to respect that. So these are the 7 or 8, KPIs or core values. I will leave it to you to figure out how well you are doing in these areas. How will you grade yourself, you know? And best of luck, because it's not an easy job, but it's also a learning job, but we can always stay ahead of the game.